Coco is considered by most to be a Pixar classic that proved the company was still capable of recapturing the magic of their glory days, coming out at just the right time when they were in something of a slump. But despite being released to near universal acclaim, that doesn't mean that the movie is completely without criticism. And one of the more interesting arguments people have made against this movie is how stubborn Miguel's family is, and how everything is portrayed as being either their way or no way. And today, I'd like to address this particular criticism against the movie while staying completely fair and objective, because there's actually a lot more to it than it would appear at first glance. And there will be spoilers for Coco, and maybe another movie or two ahead. So if you've never seen it but would like to, you shouldn't proceed with this video. You have been warned. Alright, so I already broached this subject in another video I made on Coco, which you can find a link in the description too. But there I stuck strictly to the character of Imelda herself, and was more trying to see how responsible she was for Hector almost being forgotten. But I do also bring up the fact that she comes across as quite a few times as being stubborn to the point of abuse, and specifically how she has such a stranglehold on her family that not only does she essentially threaten Miguel with death if he doesn't do what she wants, but is able to get away with it because his relatives are so afraid that they won't stand up to her. And even later on, when it's obvious Miguel won't listen, she still tries to get him to see things her way, instead of just sending the boy home before he gets himself killed. To put it very generously, it can seem that Imelda doesn't exactly have her priorities straight, appearing more concerned with Miguel falling in line than making sure he doesn't die a premature death. And it isn't much better with his living family either, as Abuelita is just as stubborn as Imelda is, having such a strict ban on music that she, along with the rest of his family, acts like Miguel committed some kind of mortal sin for having an interest in it. And that's not even getting into when she smashes his homemade guitar, genuinely believing that that would get him to listen to her. Now, to be fair, unlike Imelda, who clearly understands her actions could have dire consequences and does them anyway, it's obvious that Abuelita is oblivious to the harm she's doing, and not only loves her grandson, but does think that she's doing right by him. As well as the fact that even the narrative does place the more questionable actions of these characters in the wrong, with Miguel's father even visibly trying to stop Abuelita from destroying the guitar. But that's not exactly the subject of criticism here. It's the fact that, at least according to the people who make this argument, nothing's really changed by the end. Sure, the music ban is lifted, but what if the family has a ban on something else that somebody in the family had a passion for? The cycle would just start all over again. Because they came to see that music wasn't a bad thing after all. Not that putting a family-wide ban on something trivial is stupid and could lead to terrible consequences. To put it simply, it seems that the family learned the wrong lesson, because Miguel is only allowed to pursue his passion because his family permits it, not because they realized they shouldn't hold him back from his dreams. And if anything, it's Miguel that learns a lesson about the importance of family, while what the family itself learns is pushed more into the background. But the thing is, those who make this argument aren't taking something really important into account, which is that in Mexican culture, family is everything. Family comes first, second, third, and last, and to dishonor them is to commit the biggest sin of all. And Pixar, in their commitment to depicting the culture accurately, followed that custom to the letter. In other words, to many people watching, Ernesto de la Cruz is arguably right for saying that in order to live one's dreams, sometimes they have to make sacrifices, including family. Though obviously not anywhere near to the extent that he takes it. While in Mexican culture, doing something against your relatives' wishes, even if they're long dead ones, is absolutely unthinkable. This is why Miguel is only free to live his dream after his family accepts music again, because he now has their approval to do so. Now, I know you might be thinking, while mentality like that sounds nice in theory, it's just rife for potential problems in execution. And the movie arguably, yet unintentionally, ends up showing exactly what those problems are. Because Imelda has a bad temper and is never challenged, she automatically thinks she's right about everything, and her first impulse whenever anything doesn't go her way is to throw a tantrum. And we all see how well that goes for several people. And in a similar vein, a boy who simply wants to be a musician is treated like he was busted selling drugs and literally has his dreams crushed right in front of him. All the while his family refuses to try and understand things from his point of view because it's his obligation to just blindly do what they want. But once again, like it or not, in Mexican culture, that's exactly how it is. Miguel was in the wrong for trying to go against his family's wishes and does need to learn a lesson about how important they are. But as a consequence, the leaders of that family are never called out on their more abusive behavior. The only time something even remotely close to that happens is when Miguel points out to Imelda that he had nothing to do with her problems and that a family is supposed to support each other. But as I noted before, due to Pixar's wanting to portray the culture as accurately as possible, they weren't willing to take it any further than that. Now, as I already pointed out, regardless of what one thinks of the movie, a mentality like that can be a very disastrous one. Because at least Imelda and Abuelita meant well. As scary as that might sound, everything they do is motivated by good intentions, even if it doesn't necessarily excuse them. But as I got into in my Cinderella video, which you can also find a link in the description too, it's way too easy for parents to abuse their children already. And when the child is basically forced by their culture to honor and do what their family wants no matter what? Now, as I've said in many videos, I'm not one to give real-world commentaries in my videos, nor am I one to judge any foreign culture. All I'm trying to do is point out that Pixar was simply trying to honor Mexico with Coco, and that's why it's Miguel who has to learn the lesson, and his family isn't treated as abusive or like they're control freaks, even if many outside that culture might see them that way. And to that end, it seems that even Disney might have realized that they were sending a potentially questionable message, as Encanto is a lot harder on Alma for the way she treats her family. Though, as I've noted in other videos, even then some believe she got off too easy. But at least here, Alma's actually called out on her abuse and is forced to own up to it, with her having to do all the learning and apologizing at the end instead of Mirabel. Again, even if one thinks she was let off with a slap on the wrist, at least the movie doesn't sweep her abuse under the rug. even if she had good intentions, and has her admit that she was in the wrong. And that does send a healthier message, telling people that even if family is extremely important, abuse is never acceptable, no matter who it's coming from, and that it's your right to call them out on it if they subject you to it. And that's more than one would get out of Coco, because even if the family does learn something in addition to Miguel, they're never called out on their blatant abuse of their culture to get their family to do what they want without question. Now, if you disagree with everything I've said so far and believe that Coco handled everything perfectly, that's totally fine. Because as I said at the beginning, opinions are irrelevant here. The only thing I was trying to do was explain the issues certain people have with Coco, as well as show why the family is presented the way it is. Because the movie obviously isn't trying to condone abuse. It's simply trying to honor Mexican culture when it comes to the importance of family, which is why Miguel is the one to learn the lesson instead of them. Though, as I also pointed out, that still doesn't mean the narrative let them off completely, as they clearly learn a thing or two by the end as well, even if some would have preferred it to be to a greater extent than is shown. But either way, that was their intention, and whether or not you think they did a good job executing those intentions is entirely up to you to decide. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to cover. So now why don't you tell me? Do you believe that Coco accidentally sends a bad message to its audience through its commitment to the importance of family in Mexican culture? Or do you believe the people who say that are wrong and that the movie gets everything across just fine? Please let me know in the comments below. And let me just make it clear one more time that the opinions and arguments in this video aren't necessarily my own, and that I was simply trying to present every side of the argument fairly. And similarly, you don't have to agree with anything I said regarding them either. You can feel about Coco and the message it sends any way you want to, and if you think I completely screwed it up, that's perfectly okay. And thank you all for watching. I greatly appreciate it, and I hope to see you all next time.